Oh, yay! So we're live for day 3, and I am so excited to be on this last day of the activation series with you guys. This has honestly been so fun for me to bring this information to you guys in a way where I hope it's making more sense as to the different parts around intuition. And we have a few last things to go over for you guys to really think about and contemplate about going forward in your journey. And if you do have questions, you can always let me know. But this is the last day, and I'm so excited to share with you some ahas that I had while really diving into this material. And here's another fun thing about intuition is that when you really start to use it, like if you're in a entrepreneurship style business, you can also use it to guide you on what you're creating. I never saw myself as overly creative, but even just doing the series, like it just all came in and channeled like that. And when I first started developing my intuition 9 years ago, of course, I had like zero control over it. So I remember those days and those feelings around the intuition and just how it feels so out of control and like it's not working for you. And you see other people who are intuitive, and it's like, well, why can't I be there? Like I've had so many of those days where I idolized so many people and never realized my own potential. And of course, as you know, once you start working with it more and you start building on it, and as the time goes by, it's crazy to see the differences and the results that you will have. So, without further ado, we're going to get into the last day of slides. I am just so pumped right now. So, ignore me being really silly. Okay, sorry, let me just scroll up here. All righty, guys. So again, this is day 3, and I really hope you guys have been opening up your possibilities and expanding and stretching your mind a little bit more. So the one big thing that we haven't talked about yet that I really want to talk about is survival mode. So of course, a lot of us were in survival mode a lot of the time, just based on how our days are going, what we have on our plate, where our stress response is sitting, what our stress threshold is, and it's different for every single person. So, with the survival mode, even though it may hinder intuition, it doesn't mean that it won't come in, but it's something to definitely be aware of because it can dampen your ability. Not to say that it always will, but it definitely can affect your ability to fully hear your intuition. So if you've ever thought, well, why can't I hear my intuition? Why does it seem to just pop in randomly? Why can't I grasp it and hold on to it? Why does it seem so fleeting? Well, this could be a potential reason. So I like to start thinking about the survival mode. What does it actually do? It essentially starts in the central part of the brain called the limbic system, and it highlights an area in the spinal cord called the medulla, and even the pituitary system as well, and it stimulates the adrenal glands. There's a few different processes that happens, but essentially the areas involved is the limbic center, specifically the amygdala, the pituitary gland, the medulla, and the adrenal glands, okay? It actually changes our breathing pattern as well, and it also affects our digestion. And typically, our other body processes slow in some ways, but also give more energy to other ones, depending on what the signals are coming from, the limbic center and the hypothalamus in the brain as well. So I know these are a lot of like interesting words, but think of your hypothalamus as the master regulator to keep your body in a healthy, normal state. It's like your temperature control. If something gets too hot, it kicks in to dial back the temperature. If you're too cold, it turns up the temperature. It also helps your digestion. It helps your breathing. It helps your blood flow. Like it just helps keep everything ticking and working in a normal order to ensure health on all levels. So when you start thinking about that as well, what if the hypothalamus is constantly receiving signals through the other parts of the brain that there's danger. It's going to reserve energy for things like digestion, things that are more secondary, more, rest oriented, and give more energy to certain body processes like a higher heart rate, quicker blood pumping through in order to get us through that situation. Shallow breathing, because typically what happens when we're out of that danger state, we take in a nice deep breath, which normally would stimulate the vagus nerve. I do really want to go into the 4 F's of survival. So, flight. And the really cool thing is when you think about the obvious when it comes to survival, flight would usually mean you taking off and getting out of the situation. But what if this perceived danger or stressor isn't a thing or a person that you need to run away from? These can also be these busy working people that will work like 12 to 16 hours a day, but also feel like they don't get anything accomplished. They're also the perfectionists. They're also the anxious at times as well, and feeling like they're always rushing through their day. Sure, some of it may be beta brain, but it's also being in this flight mode. And then there's the fight mode, which in a situation, what would normally happen is that you would have to either defend yourself or fight your way out of a situation. But then when it comes to our society today, this can also look like self preservation. It can also look like temper, aggression, being demanding. And then we have the freezing mode. And this is where some people have been through trauma and they disassociate from their body because it doesn't feel safe to be in their body. So they're in a constant freeze mode. Also feeling really spacey, like beyond the daydreaming state, like severely spacey. It's different than daydreaming. It's where things almost feel unreal. Like this is life, but you're walking through it as if it feels not real at all. It almost feels like a video game or a movie or something that's kind of happening, but you don't feel a part of it. At least that's my interpretation. And then we have faint and fawn. And this is where a lot of people go to. A lot of people go into this faint and fawn situation. This is the people pleasing. This is the codependent nature. These are the people that really don't like conflict and will do everything to avoid it. So it's really interesting to see how this can play into certain factors that a lot of people will take as a personality trait, when in reality, they're just in a survival state. And you can switch between these as well. But from what I've seen, a lot of people are in one or two of them majority of the time when they're unaware of what these pieces mean. But then when you start to heal those pieces, you'll start to see it coming. Okay, so I'm starting to people please more. Why am I in survival mode right now? What is the real fear? What is the danger to me? And then work through that as you go. Because the more you work through it in the moment, the less triggering that's going to be the next time because you can anticipate it and tell yourself, okay, this isn't a dangerous situation. I can stand up for what I believe in. I can stand up for myself. I don't need to be anything other than me. I will be loved and accepted by the right people. So, like I mentioned before, usually when the stressor has actually passed, we breathe deep and stimulate our rest and digest response. However, as we all know to some extent, I mean, if you haven't had this in your life where things haven't felt rushed or go, please let me know because I'm always really interested to get the other side, the other story of how life can be. But as a general rule here, our society is very go, busy work, always like consuming something, whether it's information or things. It just feels very busy and very rushed and almost in a way to fill some voids. But because of this, it seems like that stressor never fully seems to pass. It's always looming somewhere in our environment. It's either that deadline or that bill to pay or that flat tire that I just had or this conversation I know is coming up or maybe it's an ex relationship that you're in. But when this does happen and go chronic for us to be in this chronic survival state, we can actually notice that we are dehydrated, more inflamed, feeling very exhausted, even if you have good restful sleep or what feels like restful sleep. Just to name like a few of these symptoms, even sometimes people might notice their lymphatic system starts to clog up. And I've noticed for me, when this happens, it's like the whole rib cage area. It feels fine until I start applying some light pressure, especially under the axilla, so the armpits and things like that, because they're big lymph node areas. And I've noticed I'm like, oh dear, something's going on with my lymph system. So sometimes I can correlate pieces of that to survival as well, because these are normal functioning flowing things. And I know there's many different reasons for lymphatic. I'm not saying this is the only reason. It's just been common what I've noticed from me and even some of my clients. And of course, our intuition, when we're in this heightened state, when we're aggressive or a perfectionist or disassociating or being codependent or avoiding conflict, this is where our intuition can get muddled and sometimes feel not very clear or seem to as if it stops or come to a halt, so to speak. So that's the first thing that when people come to me saying, my intuition just seems to have just stopped and disappeared, I ask them, well, how are you taking care of your stress levels? And many times people will say to me, oh, I'm not stressed at all. And then we start going through like the days, weeks, what they're dealing with, what their schedule looks like. And then they really start to see and have those ahas like, oh, I've been overloading myself and I didn't even realize because it's become such a normal state. So being very aware of how you put things into your day and making conscious decisions around how can you manage that. I know for some people it may feel like you don't have any options around how you can organize your time, but I will challenge you a little bit on that, because when we are fully rested, when we're out of survival, we're actually a lot more efficient. So being in survival mode, you won't be nearly as efficient. It's like in survival, it'll take 7 or 8 hours to do a task that when you feel fully rested will take maybe 2. So work smarter and not harder, okay? Finding out ways to optimize your daily schedule to allow for more relaxing time, to more taking care of your stress that you do feel, and things like that. And of course, I do have techniques. I'm going to be bringing in a breathing technique for you guys as well that you can also utilize. But then if you are in my Facebook group, then you will have all the triple heater meridian techniques, which is massive for the fight or flight response, which is massive for calming your adrenals and helping your lymphatic system, your digestion. Like it's just overall amazing. So when I talk about the limbic system, I want just to highlight what it looks like in the brain, because for me, I am more visual than anything else. So maybe this might be helpful. So when I talk about the homeostasis part of the brain, that's all in here. So that one area that takes care of all your body processes, it gives the signals to your body whether you're safe and need to rest and digest, or it gives the signals whether there's something we need to like get away from, there's a stress mode going on, so it sends all the appropriate signals. And then the amygdala, which is actually on both sides in the central brain, that is the area where it's the fight or flight, freeze, faint, fawn response. Okay. It is also where it governs our stress threshold. It also helps us deal with anger as well. And then the hippocampus here, that's just a part of our memory center. Okay. This is where we store all of our memory. And then this thalamus piece here is actually where all of our senses, except for scent, I believe, actually goes to as a relay center. So all the senses take in information except for the sense of scent, I believe. And the thalamus then relays that information to other parts of the brain, and I think to the hypothalamus as well, I believe, just to tell the body what's actually happening and if it's dangerous right now, or if something else needs to happen in the body. So it's where it processes all of our senses. So this is the area, the thalamus of the brain that I talk to my Reiki students about. Like when you're developing all of your five senses, your intuition more, using the energy or crystals or whatever that you're using, I also get them to visualize it opening up in the thalamus. Because eventually, when you work with all your intuitive senses, you can start using them synergistically. And I mean, this might take a while. It took me quite a number of years to develop this. So don't feel discouraged if it does take a while, because for me, it took 3 to 4 years to even get somewhere close to that state. But then, for example, I'll be working with a client and I'll hear a message or I'll hear like an old memory or event, and then I'll like get a sense of like a smell of something happening during that time, and then I might see something play like a picture or a movie, just as some examples. Like it'll all come through different mediums essentially, but it all adds to the picture of what is going on. And the more you can engage your five senses, the easier that using your intuition is going to be and bringing things into your life as well. So that's just a little bit on our limbic system. And then I do have this breathing technique. So I will put it in the files for you guys so you have access to this. But if you've noticed you're especially a person that holds your breath or breathes shallow or has any issues at all, for the most part, we should be breathing deep into the abdomen. Okay. We should be stimulating that vagus nerve. And not that I like to use the word should, but typically in a perfect world, we wouldn't shallow breathe all that often unless we were in a survival response. But unfortunately, even what I've noticed for myself, for clients, regardless, there are so many times where we're just going through the day holding our breath. And sometimes people will all of a sudden go and take in a nice deep breath and think, what was that? I've had so many people ask me, like, why does this happen to me? And then I ask them, well, how aware are you of your breathing up until that point? Right? So, just something to get clear and honest with. It's not a judgment, it's just looking into our patterns and what we may not be seeing or noticing. Because I am the first to admit, I was one of those people when I heard about the breathing techniques, I was like, oh, that's a load of garbage. If I wasn't breathing properly, I'd probably be severely, ill or dead. But I've come to learn now that that's not the case. There's other things that will happen if you're not breathing properly. Plus, the consciousness of breathing in deep is the act of taking in life, taking in that nourishment, taking in that ease, and breathing out is all around the response of letting go. So if we're in survival and we're holding our breath or we're shallow breathing, we're not really taking in life and we're not really letting go either. So this breathing technique, it may seem a little bit more difficult in the beginning. And of course, if you have any injuries or any issues, always verify with your doctor that this is okay for you to do. But of course, like any stretching or certain techniques, if you have pain, stop. Don't push yourself and injure yourself. Okay. So the first thing you would do is just lay down on your bed or on the ground, whatever's comfortable, and bend both knees so that your feet are flat on the bed or whatever surface you're on, with your hips width apart with those feet. And be aware of your abdomen and pelvis while taking slow breaths. And what that means is making sure that when you're breathing in, it's actually going into the abdomen. And then with the inhalation, the pelvis should press downward onto the bed, causing the abdomen to rise and arch to form under the lower back. And then when you exhale, the pelvis should move upward towards the ceiling, the abdomen sinking, and the low back resting against the bed. And you would do this rocking motion with the breath 5 times unless you start to feel dizzy. If you feel dizzy, just stop, okay? And then build yourself up to doing the 5 exaggerated breaths. And you would do it with your legs bent. And then the next thing you would do is do the same thing, but your legs are going to be down and no longer bent. So still hip width apart and still doing that rocking motion with the pelvis. And then just spend 2 minutes just breathing naturally while focusing on the rocking of the pelvis. So still just breathing normally, but also tuning into that pelvis, making sure it's going downwards and upwards with each inhalation and exhalation. Because literally, what you're doing is training your body to breathe in. I don't like using the term proper, but basically breathing in more of a healthy way. And then once you've done this, you just go to sleep. So this is something you would do before sleeping because it really does stimulate all the rest aspects and all the digestion aspects. It really stimulates your vagus nerve and helps activate the parasympathetic state, which is the rest and digest in the central nervous system. Like I mentioned, do not overdo the exercise. But some things that this can improve, which is amazing, is the blood circulation, lymphatic circulation, nerve conduction, digestive function, liver detoxification, brain function, giving more clarity, the meridian system actually running through your body as well, because we have 12 meridians. It also initiates that vagus nerve, which is the rest digest mode as well, once that's stimulated. And there's other ways to stimulate your vagus nerve too. You can also gargle cold water, I believe it is, or just gargle water and then splash cold water on your actual face. That can also help stimulate it. So there's a few things that you can look up as well. And also when you're drinking water, doing almost like that exaggerated like drinking process so that you can actually hear it going down the throat. That can also really help too. So I'm going to go into the five senses because it's also what I teach my Reiki students. And I find this is very helpful just to have in your knowledge base around the five senses. So the five senses is how we perceive our world and our reality. The five senses is essentially when they're clear, our ability to perceive things from a clear way. But then, of course, our five senses is typically where we build all of our filters and emotions, and that's how we get distorted information. So when we talk about intuition that's been wrong or distorted, it could just be that there was a filter on there, like a belief system or an emotion or a judgment that you might not have been aware of that actually distorted the information coming through. Now, this isn't a judgment, this happens to all of us. So, the more that we can defilter and deprogram our senses, the more clarity that you're going to have. So, this might make some sense to you as I go through this as to, oh, if you've ever had like toxic relationship patterns, there might be a little bit more energetically to that. And again, not blaming or, victim shaming anyone. But when I read these, I'm like, that's my problem. Okay, let's do some work on that. So the first one is the sense of smell. This is our whole body awareness, guys. It's our environmental awareness. So if you're having a lot of issues with feeling safe in your environment and you're in survival mode, and some people, even with agoraphobia here, can have issues with this. It is where, obviously if it's out of balance, those things get affected. You can also smell the differences in the body. So when you get really in tune with the senses, oh man, the number of clients I've worked with where I'm like, oh, I can smell like an issue with the microbes. I can smell like a yeast issue. And when people think of yeast infection, they don't really think of the actual digestive system. Yeast can overgrow anywhere in the body. We have a normal amount of certain microbes in our system, but sometimes they can overgrow. So it's not just that yeast infections can be one part of the body, they can literally be in many other places, like the large intestine, small intestine, stomach. And one of the new things that people are starting to realize as well is that there is like bacterial overgrowth that can also happen in your stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and really throw off the microbes. There are harmful bacteria in our system as well as good bacteria. Some people I've noticed that I've worked with in class, it's just mind blowing that some people can even smell cancer when it's developing. To me, that's just amazing. But people have these really in tune sensitive abilities. And some people I've known in my family who have been in the nursing field, it's like they can smell something going on with that patient of theirs or whichever, and they're able to get them help before the actual symptoms start to appear. So here's some practical ways of using this. Like if you're a nurse, it's pretty cool if you use your intuition to help the people that come to you. I think that is powerful to be able to utilize that. But in even in the technology field, say you're um, in some sort of like IT computer aspect, you can use your intuition for so many things in regards to that. So helping with, the data side of things, customer relationships, there's just a number of things you can use. But I digress. So the sense of smell as well is related to our survival. It's our fight or flight response, and it's our discernment of real danger. But get this, also sexual partners. So if you have any filters at all going on around, for example, the people that you've dated, and it creates like a belief system that, say, for example, all men are dangerous or all men are cheaters, or, you know, you can't trust anyone. This can really affect what you smell as a potential candidate. Even though consciously you're saying, I want someone who is honest and trustworthy. But if you've had those experiences that haven't been fully dealt with or healed, and you have those belief systems affecting what you smell, those people might actually be more attractive to you in such a weird way. So, just something to be aware of. Again, I don't want to like judge or blame anyone saying this is why it's happening to them, but really feel into the information if this is something that's coming up for you and see if maybe this is a part of it. I know for me, I have no problems saying that this was my problem. Like I thought I had a really good handle on things, but instead I had a lot of belief systems around relationships and how they look. And it made sense. I'm like, oh, that's why the people that were potential suitors for me felt aligned but weren't actually. But then, of course, there's the other side of things where people can project and mask, and there's a whole other slew, but this is just, a little tidbit into that piece. So the sense of taste is intertwined with the sense of smell. It's all about our body awareness as well, the environmental awareness, and this is where people can taste the difference. And the sayings that come up, something left a bad taste in my mouth? Well, this is why, is the way to explain those intuitive pieces. Can taste infections as well, which I know sounds so cool to be able to taste someone having an infection, but some people utilize their senses that way. But sense of taste is also related to nourishment and discernment. We can also filter, our sense of taste. And when you think of the tongue as well, it also represents how we speak from the heart. So if we have issues around that, it's very interesting to see. Then we have the sense of hearing, which is how we hear words, messages, frequencies. You can hear memories. And I put that in there because there's times where, again, I'm working with a client and I can hear a memory playing, but I can't see it. So I think that's really interesting. So even though you may not use it that way, that's okay. Because really, all the sense of hearing represents is the ability to hear the truth, to tune into your surroundings, to be able to listen, and tuning into the surroundings beyond a normal sense. There's plenty of things that you can read up online around how animals can actually detect the vibrations and things that are changing their environment before it actually happens. So again, built-in survival tool, but we can use it for so much more as well. Then we have our sense of sight, which is our mind's eye. Okay, so in the subtle sense realm, when we're talking about intuition, the sense of sight is how we see things with our mind. Okay, so for the longest time, maybe some of you will relate to this. I thought I was doing something wrong with my intuition because I was always seeing it in my mind, but not subjectively. So in the environment, I thought, oh, if I was to really connect with spirits, I would just see them standing before me. Well, I will tell you that has happened once in a while, but for the most part, I see it in my mind's eye. And most people are like this. I'm sure you can build subjective and mind's eye abilities, but from what I've seen, subjective is really hard to do. And the mind's eye piece is actually the normal intuitive piece that many of us might miss. So you can also see auras. So people have auras that extend out 6 feet, but I notice it's easy or easier to focus on the Wei Qi or the first auric layer. And you can play with this and try it. But when you're looking at someone, just look past them, like past their shoulder if they're closer to your height, and then just see if you can see that white outline start to come into play. And you'll notice that some people will have like an inch and a half thick all the way around them, and it looks great. That's a healthy Wei Qi or forced auric layer. Some people, you can see it in some spots, but not others. That just means that, it's either underdeveloped or they're sensitive to their environment but haven't built up their protection mechanisms. There's many different reasons. But people can also see, colors and meridians and the chakras. And some people can even like use their mind's eye, like an x-ray, and see the microbes in someone's body as they're working with them. And that's if you're in the healing realm. So typically you wouldn't go around, seeing who has what type of microbes in their body. But this can be really beneficial if you have pets, because a lot of the time, they can be very prone to parasites, and we may not realize that that's what's going on. There's been times where I've worked with horses and they were talking about, oh yeah, it seems like something's off with them, and I'll go into their intestines and just kind of feel around. And I know this sounds weird, but then you can also use that x-ray sight. And there's been times where I've been able to feel the parasites like squiggling around, and other times where I've literally seen them with my mind's eye. Memories can play like movies here, as well as getting images. But then, just as like a very high level, being able to see the truth. So the basic consciousness of the sight is seeing the truth, having clarity, and if it's imbalanced, this is where there wouldn't be the clarity, of course, but also avoidance, and then sense of touch. This is where a lot of people, where they're empathic, where their, abilities seem to come from. It's the sense of touch. So this is the empathy, the feeling others' emotions, the feeling the pain that other people have, the gut instincts that you can't rationalize, gathering information from whatever you touch, which is psychometry. And if you have time to play with this and see what you get, do it. It's amazing. I started playing around with it a lot more in 2014, and I went to some sacred sites. And at the time, you were allowed to touch, you were allowed to go into these places, and I actually used my hands to pick up information. And even our tour guide was just like blown away. She's like, how do you know about that? This is not what we talk about on the tour. And we had a really long, fun conversation after that. So psychometry is fun, and everyone can develop it. Like, play with it because it's so fun. You can also feel the auras and the chakras and the microbes, like I was just talking about as well. So you can feel the frequency. And when I do some meditations, you can feel your auric field. It has like this magnetism. And I never realized that was possible, which now that I'm saying it sounds ridiculous to me, but I honestly didn't know about that magnetism with the auric field until actually a couple months ago. So really cool. And things will just start to develop. It's amazing. And then the thalamus in the brain is that relay center for all your five senses, normal and subtle, except for the sense of smell. I believe that's the one. Yeah. Once developing them one at a time, we can access a higher potential of using them synergistically through that relay. So now that we've gone through these 3 days together and you have a little bit more information and you've done your intuitive, trust switches and done some meditations and got some amazing results, develop a daily self practice. It could be 5 minutes long as you're being consistent, because now you're really starting to open up and build a new skill, or going deeper into the skill that you've already created. So some examples of what you can do is focusing in on your trust switch in the heart, as well as the intuition. Do the breathing technique. Engage all the five senses. This is what I tell my clients and my students to do. When you're just in regular old situations every day and you're talking to someone or in a certain experience or just walking around in your day, ask yourself, what do I feel? What do I hear? What do I see? What do I smell and taste beyond the normal side? So when I say this, sure, yeah, you can go into like what you can physically feel, touch, see, and do, but I want to challenge you to ask you, like, what do you actually feel when you walk into a store? What do you feel? Can you feel the other people that have been in there? Can you feel the energy of the land or the store itself or the people working there? It's just really interesting to play around with that. Also have like a little book or a document on your cell phone or your laptop and write down your intuitive experiences. And then go back and add an area for your wins. So if some of these ended up coming up as, yeah, you were dead on, you were right, sweet. Start building that evidence list. And don't forget to celebrate your experiences. Whether you have that external validation or not, it's an amazing piece for you to really start honing in and opening up your mind for more possibilities. The self practice is going to propel you even further into trusting yourself, your intuition. So, these are just some guidelines. Feel free to make up your own, whatever makes sense to you and how you want to utilize it. If you're trying to call in something for your life as well, then that's something you also have to revisit at least a couple times a day for like 5 to 10 seconds and just give that energy, right? And this is no different. You need to give it energy to create that new neural pathway that you're now carving out. And if you have any other self practices that you do that isn't on this list, please put it in the comments. I would love to hear what your self practice is and what is also working for you if you've been developing this for a while. And I also want to hear back from you guys if you found these 3 days valuable and what you've gotten from it and how the information is landing for you as well. So that's it. That is the end of our 3rd day, just some extra information. You have your tools now. I don't want to overload you with too many things to focus on. So start there and check back with me. If you have questions, please let me know in the comments. If you have experiences you'd like to share, I welcome all of that. I love the feedback that comes. But if you're also looking to expand your intuition further and have more tools and more of a structure, please reach out to me as well. Because if you start to notice that this is really working and there's tangible ways for this and it makes sense and you're loving it and you want to take a class to further develop tools that you can use quickly every single day, just to help drop you into that alpha state, to help drop you into that state of awareness and knowing, and to help resolve essentially most of what you're working with in a very quick way, then I'm just sending out that call that this is not something that you need to feel obligated to do. If this feels like a good fit to jump into a class in January, then please let me know and we can start having discussions around that too. So feel invited, not obligated. If it's calling you, I look forward to the discussions. But otherwise, if you have questions or more to add, please tell me and let me know. I welcome it all. But from the depths of my heart, thank you so much for sharing these 3 days with me. I really hope it's been valuable for you. And I just love the experiences that have been coming with it so far. And everything that you guys have been sharing with me. It's really cool to really see how people can open up and really become the more powerful version of themselves that they've been wanting. And it's just, yes, I love it. So thank you guys so much. And I look forward to doing more of these little trainings with you guys. And have a great holiday. And I will chat with you all soon.